Developers took my land without permission. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then I saw them, laughing, building luxury condos right on my property. They said it was community expansion. They said I should be proud. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. Because by the time they realized the truth, it was already too late. Their dream project was built on my revenge. Welcome to HOA Secrets Uncovered, where quiet neighborhoods hide the loudest secrets. I'm Mark, a homeowner from Willow Creek. I fix old houses for a living and mind my own business. At least I used to. Until the Homeowners Association decided my land was theirs to sell. What happened next turned our peaceful suburb into a battlefield of lawyers, lies, and demolition dust. So let me tell you exactly how it all began. That morning felt like any other. The sun was soft, the air smelled like cut grass, and my dog was barking at the mailman again. But then I heard a different sound. A deep, sharp thud that rattled my kitchen window. At first, I thought maybe someone was fixing their fence. But then I heard another one. And another. It was steady, heavy, mechanical. The kind of sound you feel in your chest. I stepped out onto my porch and froze. There were trucks. Big, white construction trucks lined up along the street. Men in orange vests walking across my yard. My yard. They were hammering stakes into the ground. Spray painting lines over my garden. Cutting through my fence like it wasn't even there. I shouted, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" One of them looked at me like I was the problem. He said, "We're breaking ground, sir. Phase 1 of the condo project." I said, "This is private property." He shrugged, talked to the HOA, they signed off. The HOA. I stared at the man, then down at my fence posts lying broken in the dirt. And I swear, my hands started shaking. I walked to the edge of my property, where the old oak tree used to stand. They'd cut it down. The one my father planted. Gone. Just a stump and fresh tire tracks. I stormed toward the clubhouse. Every step I took, I could hear the machines behind me, tearing apart my peace, my memories, my land. Inside the clubhouse, they were having a meeting. Of course they were. There she was, the HOA president, Janet Cole, always wearing that perfect smile that never reached her eyes. "Mark," she said, "we were just going to call you." "Call me?" I said. "You're building condos on my land." She smiled, leaned back in her chair. "Oh no, not your land anymore. According to the revised community map, that lot was reclassified as shared property for future development." I blinked at her. Reclassified by who? She slid a file toward me. "Board decision," she said sweetly. "You were notified last quarter." I opened the file. No signature. No stamp. No date I'd ever seen before. "You forged this," I said quietly. Her smile didn't even twitch. "We followed procedure," she said. "If you have concerns, take it up with the board." I looked around the table. 7 faces, all pretending to check their notes. No one met my eyes. That was the moment I realized I was alone. Or at least, they thought I was. I walked out without another word. Outside, the trucks were louder now. Concrete mixers humming. A sign already up. "Willow Creek Residences, luxury living starts here." I stood in front of it. Luxury living, on my land. The same land I'd spent years saving for. The same soil I dug with my own hands. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the construction lights flicker. My coffee went cold, my hands didn't stop shaking. They thought I'd give up. They thought I'd just watch them erase me. But they didn't know. I'm not the kind of man who folds when someone says policy. The next morning, I went digging. Not in the dirt, in my files. Old papers, deeds, receipts. Everything my father ever kept. And there it was. The original land survey. Signed, dated, recorded at the county office. No mention of any shared property. No HOA claim. Nothing. They lied. I printed copies. 3 sets. One for me. One for a lawyer. And one for Janet Cole. When I walked back to that site the next day, the workers stopped. They could feel the anger before I said a word. "Tell your boss," I said quietly. "They're building on private land." He looked confused. "Sir, the HOA gave us full clearance." I smiled. "They won't be giving you anything for long." Janet tried to call me that evening. I didn't pick up. Then came the letters. 3 in 1 week. Each one colder than the last. Unauthorized confrontation with construction personnel. Violation of HOA communication standards. Failure to comply with community development cooperation. Cooperation. That word made me laugh. They took my property and wanted me to cooperate. So I decided, fine. I'll cooperate. But not the way they expect. I started showing up at every board meeting. Front row seat. Smiling. Taking notes. Asking questions. They couldn't throw me out. Not yet. I learned their rules. Their bylaws. Their petty, ridiculous regulations. If they wanted to play the HOA game, I'd learn the rule book better than them. And when the time came, I'd use it to bury them. But the strangest part came later that week, when I found a letter taped to my door. No envelope. No signature. Just one line written in black marker. They did the same thing to me. Meet me at the park after dark. I read it twice. My heart started racing. Someone else knew. I looked out my window. The street was quiet. Too quiet. The construction site empty for the night. The wind carried the sound of loose metal and creaking fences. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. But who left that note? And what did they mean by the same thing? That note stayed in my hand for hours. I kept reading the same line again and again. They did the same thing to me. Meet me at the park after dark. The handwriting was rough, rushed, like someone wrote it while looking over their shoulder. It didn't look fake. It didn't look like one of Janet's little scare tactics either. It looked desperate. I waited until the street lights flickered on. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Even the construction site had gone still. Just the faint hum of generators in the distance. I slipped the note into my jacket and walked to Willow Creek Park. It was only a few blocks away, but that night, it felt miles long. Every porch light I passed felt like an eye watching me. When I reached the park, it was empty. The swings creaked softly in the wind. The pond shimmered under the streetlight. And then I heard footsteps. A man stepped out from behind the gazebo. Older, graybeard, baseball cap pulled low. He looked tired, but not scared. "You got my note," he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied. "Who are you?" "Name Gary." He said, "Used to live on Maple Drive before the HOA took it." "Took it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "They called it rezoning, said my fence was on community land. 2 months later, the land was redeveloped. My house, gone." I felt my chest tighten. It was happening again. Not just to me. "They've done this to others?" I asked. He handed me a folded envelope. Inside were copies of legal letters, property reassignments, HOA approvals. All signed by Janet Cole. Same handwriting. Same fake signatures. "I tried to fight it," Gary said. "They buried me in paperwork, fines, late fees, legal threats. I lost everything." He looked around before whispering, "But you've got something they didn't proof, and they know it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked me dead in the eye. "They've been watching you, Mark. You're on their list now." A cold wind blew through the park. Leaves rustled around our feet. And suddenly, I understood why the letter was written in a hurry. I looked back at the houses across the street. One of the porch lights flicked on, then off, then on again. A signal. Or just my imagination. Gary turned to leave. "Be careful," he said. "They don't lose quietly." And just like that, he disappeared into the dark. I stood there for a long time, my breath clouding in the cold, the sound of distant engines rolling again down my street. When I got home, the noise was louder. The trucks were back. At night, they were pouring concrete under floodlights, even though construction wasn't allowed after hours. I stormed out to the curb. "Hey, you can't work at night. It's against code." One of the men shouted back, "We got permission." "From who?" He pointed toward the clubhouse. And there she was, Janet Cole, in a white hard hat, smiling at me from the sidewalk, like it was all some private joke. I walked up to her, my voice calm but my hands trembling. "You're trespassing," I said. "You're building on my property again." She tilted her head. "You're mistaken, Mark," she said softly. "This land belongs to the HOA now. You really should keep up with the changes." "I have the documents," I said, "the original deeds." "Oh, those old papers," she said, laughing. "We've already filed the updated ones, county approved." My blood ran cold. They were changing the records, rewriting history. She leaned closer. "I suggest you stop causing trouble," she whispered. "It won't end well for you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that smile off her face. But instead, I walked away. Because I knew anger wouldn't save me. Proof would. I stayed up all night scanning every file I had. Dates, maps, surveys. Then I found something strange. A signature from the county officer. It looked copied. The exact same shape on two different documents. I compared them. They were identical. A stamp, not a real signature. They forged government approval. The next morning, I drove to the county office myself. The clerk looked through her system. Her eyes widened. "There's no record of any HOA update," she said. "Who told you it was approved?" "Janet Cole," I said. She frowned. "She doesn't have that authority." I smiled for the first time in days. Now I had proof. When I got back home, I noticed something strange. My mailbox was open. Inside was a fine. Violation, unapproved surveillance cameras. I laughed out loud. They were trying to scare me with paperwork again. But this time it wouldn't work. I walked straight to my shed, grabbed my old camera, and set it up facing the construction site. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd film every shovel they lifted. By afternoon, the crew returned. I pressed record. They were digging near the corner of my property line. That spot used to have an old water main under it. And when they hit it, a burst of water shot into the air. The site flooded in seconds. The workers scrambled. Janet screamed orders. I just stood there watching. They'd broken a city pipe. On land they didn't own. On record they'd forged. It was like karma had shown up early. By evening, city inspectors arrived. They started asking questions. And I watched Janet's perfect confidence crumble. Her voice cracked. Her papers didn't match. Her map didn't line up. And I didn't say a word. I just smiled. Because I knew this was only the beginning. That night, as the last truck left the muddy mess they'd made, I noticed something new on my porch. A small box. No label. Just my name written in thick black ink. Inside was a USB drive. And a note that said, "You'll want to see this." I plugged it into my computer. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Hidden camera footage. From the HOA office. Janet and the developers counting envelopes of cash. They were selling off lots illegally. Rezoning land that didn't belong to them. And pocketing the money. I leaned back in my chair. Heart pounding. Whoever sent me this knew everything. But why send it to me? And how much danger was I really in now? The footage kept playing. And I couldn't take my eyes off it. There was Janet, the same fake smile, sitting in the HOA office after hours. Stacks of cash on the table. 2 men beside her, both wearing developer badges. They were laughing, whispering about clean paperwork, and the land nobody will miss. I felt sick. Every word echoed through my head like a hammer. They weren't just corrupt. They were criminals. I rewound the footage again and again. It wasn't edited. The timestamp showed the night before they started building on my property. They planned it all. I sat there in the dark, only the light from my computer screen on my face. And for the first time since it all began, I felt calm. Not scared. Not angry. Just focused. They thought they could rewrite the rules. But I was going to make them choke on their own paperwork. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office. Everyone stopped talking. Janet looked up from her desk. "Mark," she said slowly, "we weren't expecting you." I smiled. "Oh, I know," I said. "I just wanted to drop something off." I pulled out a flash drive and set it on the table. Her eyes flicked to it. Just for a second. But I saw the fear. She tried to hide it behind a laugh. "What's this?" she said lightly. "Proof," I said, "and I think you already know what kind." Her fingers froze on the desk. The room went quiet. "I'll see you at the next board meeting," I said. Then I turned and walked out. Every eye followed me. But no one dared say a word. That evening, I received another letter. This time not a fine. Not a threat. Just a short typed note. "Stop before you lose everything you care about." No signature. No logo. Just those words. I folded it, slipped it into my drawer, and kept working. If they were trying to scare me, it meant I was close. The next board meeting was packed. Half the neighborhood showed up. People were angry about the construction mess, the broken water line, the noise. And Janet, well, she tried her best to play calm. "Thank you for your patience, everyone," she said. Smiling tight, "We're doing what's best for the community." I raised my hand. "Janet," I said, "would you like to tell everyone where the HOA funds have been going?" The room went still. Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" she said quickly. "All our finances are transparent." "Then you won't mind if we show everyone this," I said. I plugged my USB into the projector and hit play. The room gasped. There she was, Janet, counting cash, laughing with the developers, talking about rezoning for profit. The silence that followed was the loudest I'd ever heard. Neighbors turned toward her, murmuring, whispering, phones recording. She stammered something about deepfakes, fake videos, misunderstandings. But the damage was done. Then something unexpected happened. The developers stood up. They didn't defend her. They walked out. One of them muttered, "You promised this was clean." Janet's hands trembled as she gathered her papers. The board tried to adjourn the meeting. But the crowd wasn't leaving. Not this time. That night I went home feeling like I'd finally won. But the victory didn't feel sweet. It felt heavy. like I'd stepped into something much bigger than just one HOA. Around midnight, I heard a car stop outside. Headlights washed across my living room wall. Then a loud thud on my porch. I went outside. No car. Just a single folder lying by the door. Inside were photos. Me sitting at my desk. Me talking to Gary at the park. Me filming the construction site. Someone had been watching me. And at the bottom of the pile was a single note. Wrong enemy, Mark. You have no idea who you're fighting. I looked around. The street was empty. Just the soft hum of streetlights and the rustle of leaves. Was it Janet? Was it someone else she worked for? Or was there another hand behind all this, one even she feared? The next morning, Gary showed up at my doorstep. He looked worried. Mark, he said, you need to leave for a few days. Why? I asked. They're going to make you disappear, he said quietly. You hurt their pocket, these people, they don't stop with lawsuits. He handed me an envelope. Inside were more documents. Older HOA files, signed years ago by someone else. Different names. Different handwriting. But the same pattern. Same fraud. This wasn't just Janet. It was the entire HOA structure. Layered corruption, stretching back years. I felt my blood boil. All those homeowners who lost their land. Their savings. Their homes. It wasn't by accident. It was by design. That evening, I decided to go one step further. I uploaded the footage anonymously. Sent it to every homeowner. Every local journalist. Every city inspector. And then I waited. By midnight, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages. Calls. People asking questions. Reporters requesting interviews. It had gone public. I stood by the window, looking out over the half-finished condos. The construction site was dark. No lights. No movement. Just silence. Then headlights again. A single car slowly driving by my house. Stopping for a few seconds. Then leaving. A warning. Or a reminder. I closed my curtains and sat down. Somewhere out there, someone knew I'd just blown their cover. And they weren't happy about it. But for the first time, I didn't care. They wanted silence. I gave them a storm. Still, a thought wouldn't leave my mind. Gary's warning. You have no idea who you're fighting. And maybe he was right. Because if Janet was just the front, then who was the one pulling the strings behind the HOA's smiling mask? That night I couldn't sleep. The silence felt wrong, too heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. I sat by the window again. The same one I'd watched the construction from. But this time there were no trucks. No workers. No Janet. Just shadows, and the faint hum of a car engine parked somewhere down the street. I turned off my lights and watched quietly. There was a black SUV sitting under the street lamp. No plates. No movement. Just watching. My stomach tightened. Was it them? Were they already here to shut me up? I grabbed my phone and tried to take a picture. The flash went off by accident. And in that instant, the SUV's headlights flared to life. The engine roared. And it sped off into the night. Gone. No trace. No sound. Just tire marks on the pavement. I knew then I wasn't safe anymore. The next morning my phone rang. Private number. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Mr. Reed, the voice said. Calm deep too calm. I suggest you stop whatever it is you're doing. It's not worth the trouble. Who is this? I asked. The line went quiet. Then the voice said, we prefer our neighborhoods peaceful. And hung up. I stood there frozen. Peaceful, that word again. The HOA's favorite excuse. I sat down and thought. If they wanted peace, I'd give them war. But not loud, not angry. Smart. I called Gary. Told him everything. The SUV, the call, the threat. He met me at a diner just outside of town. He looked around before sitting down. They're scared, he said. That means you've hit something real. I leaned in. Then we dig deeper. He nodded. I've been looking into the developer contracts. There's one company name that keeps showing up, Helmsworth Development Group. You know who owns it? I shook my head. Janet's husband, he said quietly. And guess who sits on the county zoning board? My jaw tightened. It all made sense now. The approvals. The signatures. The silence from the county office. They weren't just stealing land. They were laundering it through their own family company. Gary handed me a folder. Inside were copies of old contracts, bank transfers, and zoning documents. Every single one tied back to Helmsworth Development. Every single one signed by someone connected to Janet. This is enough to bury them, I whispered. Yeah, Gary said, if we make it that far. That night I started preparing. Copies of everything. Hidden drives. Encrypted folders. If something happened to me, the truth would still come out. I printed a single photo from the footage, Janet shaking hands with her husband over an envelope of cash. I framed it and hung it right by my front door. A little reminder of who I was dealing with. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. The moment I stepped inside, I felt eyes on me. 2 men in suits were sitting in the hallway. They weren't talking, just watching. I walked up to the records desk. The clerk from before looked nervous. She leaned in and whispered, "They told me not to talk to you again." "Who did?" I asked. She just shook her head, then slipped me a note under the counter. "Storage room 3B, 10 p.m. tonight." I left without saying a word. By nightfall, the courthouse was dark. The kind of empty that makes your heartbeat sound loud. I found room 3B. The door was half open. Inside, the same clerk. And another man, someone from the city planning department. They had a stack of folders on the table. "These are the originals," the man said. "We made copies for the developers, but this is what they changed." He opened one file. 2 property maps. Mine and the new one. The lines were different. Completely shifted. "They altered the grid," he said. "Moved the boundary by 60 feet. That's how they stole your land." He looked around nervously. "If they find out I gave you this, I'm finished." I took the files and nodded. "You didn't give me anything," I said. "I found them." When I walked back to my car, the parking lot lights flickered. For a second, I thought it was just bad wiring. Then I saw it. A shadow standing by my car. I froze. The figure didn't move. Didn't speak. Then I heard a whisper. "Drop the papers, Mark." My heart jumped. It was the same voice from the phone call. "Who are you?" I said. The figure stepped closer. Tall suit, gloved hands. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said. "People get hurt when they don't know their place." I took a step forward. "Yeah," I said. "Then maybe it's time someone changes the rules." Headlights flared in the distance. Another car pulling in. The man turned his head just for a second and I ran. I jumped into my truck. Engine roared to life. And I sped out of there before the second car even stopped. In the mirror, I saw the shadow man watching. Calm. Still. Unmoved. Like he already knew where I was going next. When I got home, my house was dark. But something felt off. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside. Everything looked the same. Until I saw it. My framed foe. The one of Janet and her husband. Broken. Glass on the floor. And in its place, a note written in neat handwriting. Last warning. No signature. No initials. Just those 2 words. I sat down on the couch. My hands were shaking. But my mind was. If they wanted a war, they had one now. I sent copies of the files to 3 local reporters, and one to an anonymous email address I'd found on a corruption forum. No going back now. No hiding. No fear. The truth was out there, and I'd make sure the whole town saw it. But as I stared at that broken frame on the floor, a thought crept into my head that I couldn't shake. If Janet wasn't behind this alone, then who had the power to follow me, threaten me, and rewrite county records? I didn't leave the house for 2 days after that night. Not because I was scared, at least that's what I told myself, but because every time I stepped near a window, I felt eyes on me. Like the glass was being watched from both sides. The silence of my home felt wrong. The air heavier than it should have been. Even the clock ticking in the kitchen started to sound like a countdown. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. My throat tightened as I picked up. Still digging, the voice said, calm and steady. I warned you once. I didn't answer. I just listened to the hum on the other end. Then the voice said something that froze me. You think Janet's your problem. You have no idea what you've stepped into. Click. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone like it might explain itself. But it didn't. It just vibrated again, this time a text. Check your back door. I turned slowly, heart pounding so loud it drowned the silence. There, taped to the glass door, was a manila envelope. No name, no address, just a black mark, an X. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos. Grainy, night vision stills of me and Gary at the diner. Me at the courthouse. Even me sleeping through my window. Every angle, every moment. They'd been watching. Recording. But that wasn't the worst part. The last photo wasn't of me. It was Gary. Lying in his car, head slumped against the window, unmoving. I felt my stomach twist. I called him immediately. No answer. Again. Nothing. So I grabbed my keys and drove. Every red light felt like a trap, every shadow another SUV. When I finally reached his place, the police were already there. Blue lights flashing. Yellow tape cutting across his front yard. Neighbors whispering on the sidewalk. An officer stopped me. Sir, you can't come in here. He's my friend, I shouted. What happened to him? The officer exchanged a look with his partner, then said quietly, heart attack, at least that's what it looks like. Heart attack. Gary was 43, ran every morning, didn't even drink coffee. Something wasn't right. And they knew it. You could see it in the officer's eyes, like he'd been told not to ask questions. That night, I sat in my truck outside the old construction site again. The one that started it all. The wind howled through the half-finished houses. Wood creaking, wires swaying. But what caught my attention wasn't the sound. It was the light. One of the houses, deep inside the fenced area, had a single room glowing dim blue. It wasn't a worker's lamp. It was softer, pulsing like a heartbeat. Curiosity, or stupidity, pushed me to climb the fence. My boots hit the gravel silently. I crept closer. And then I heard voices. Transfer's complete, one said. They'll never trace it now, another replied. I peeked through a crack in the plywood. 2 men in suits, laptops open on portable tables. They weren't builders. They were data techs, wires running to a small, cube-shaped device on the floor. Its blue glow flickering faster with every click. They weren't just building houses here. They were transferring something digital, something hidden. A third person stepped in, and my heart almost stopped. Janet. She was wearing black hair tied back. She looked calm, professional, cold. "Once the last transfer's done, wipe the backups," she said. "We can't afford another leak after what happened to Gary." Gary. They knew. They did it. I backed away quietly, every muscle shaking. But a piece of gravel rolled under my shoe. The sound was small, barely a crunch. Yet every head inside snapped toward the door. "Who's there?" I ran, bolted between the skeleton frames of houses. Heart pounding so hard I thought it'd give me away. I jumped the fence, tore my sleeve on the wire, and didn't stop until I was halfway down the block. Behind me, headlights flared again. SUV black, no plates. Same one from before. I darted into the trees near the creek and hid there for almost an hour. Listening. Waiting. The SUV idled, then drove off slowly. When I finally made it home, it was past 3 a.m. My hands still shaking as I locked the doors. But I wasn't scared anymore. No, this was proof. They killed Gary because he found the link. They were transferring data, money maybe, or property ownership, through fake construction records. The land wasn't the goal. It was a cover. I barely slept before the sun rose. And that morning, a knock echoed through my door. 3 taps, slow, deliberate. I peeked through the peephole. It wasn't the police. It was Janet. Her smile was calm, practiced, like nothing had ever happened. "Mark," she said sweetly, "we should talk." I opened the door halfway. "About what?" "The fake houses, the dead friend." Her smile didn't fade. "Careful," she said softly. "You're letting your imagination run wild again." Then she leaned in and whispered something that made my blood turn cold. Gary didn't listen either. She walked away before I could say another word, her heels clicking against the pavement, the sound echoing long after she turned the corner. I closed the door and leaned against it, her perfume still hanging in the air. That faint floral scent I used to associate with morning coffee and neighborly smiles. Now it smelled like danger. I knew what I had to do. Expose everything. Go public. Make so much noise that they couldn't silence me like they did Gary. So I uploaded everything I had, the files, the contracts, even the blurry video of Janet and her husband. I sent it to journalists, online forums, and whistleblower pages. Within hours, it started spreading. People began asking questions. The story was out there. Finally. But then something strange happened. Every post, every link, every upload vanished within minutes. Taken down, deleted. Even my email accounts locked out. Like I'd never existed online at all. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Janet or her husband anymore. It was something much bigger. Something powerful enough to erase an entire story from the internet in seconds. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by printouts and files. And for the first time since this started, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Because if they could kill Gary, erase data, and control local police, then what else could they do? And more importantly, why did they need to hide this much? I barely slept that night. Every sound in my house felt louder than usual. The wind through the vents, the creak of the floorboards, even the hum of the refrigerator. It all sounded like whispers. Like the house itself was trying to warn me. I sat by the window, watching the empty street. The streetlights flickered every few minutes. And every time they did, My reflection stared back at me in the glass, tired and hollow. That's when I noticed something new. A car parked down the street. Engine off, lights out. But the silhouette of someone inside, just sitting there motionless. For 3 hours they didn't move. Didn't smoke, didn't use a phone. Just sat and watched. I should have called the police. But after everything that happened with Gary, I knew that call would go nowhere. So instead, I picked up my camera. Took pictures. If they wanted to watch me, fine. I'd start watching them. By morning, the car was gone. But something else wasn't. Right outside my mailbox was a small white envelope. No address, no name, just my initials, M.W., written in neat block letters. I opened it right there on the porch. Inside was a photo. An old one. Of me and my dad, standing in front of the same plot of land where those condos now sat. He was holding the original deed, smiling, proud. On the back of the photo, someone had written 3 words in red ink. They erased him too. My hands went numb. I hadn't thought about my dad in years. He died when I was a teenager, heart failure, they said. But I started to wonder. Was it really? I went through the basement that afternoon, digging through old boxes, papers, anything my father left behind. That's when I found an old metal briefcase tucked behind a loose wall panel. Inside there were documents, blueprints, and letters, all labeled Willow Creek Development, private use only. Some were contracts between the early HOA members and a company called Lornex Property Group. But what caught my eye wasn't the signatures, it was the date. 1996, the year before my father died. He was part of the land deal. He knew about it. And maybe he tried to stop it. I found one last note in his handwriting, folded between the pages. If they ever come for you, don't fight them in the light. Find the vault. The truth's buried where the land begins. The vault. I didn't know what he meant. But I knew exactly where to look. The old creek at the edge of the property. The same spot the developers fenced off before they started construction. That night, I drove there with a flashlight and a shovel. The moon was hidden behind clouds. The air smelled like rain and earth. I parked far from the site and walked the rest of the way through the trees. The sound of water echoed softly in the dark. And there it was, the old concrete slab near the creek's bend, half buried, cracked. A piece of rebar sticking out like a handle. I pulled. It didn't move at first. But after a few tries, the slab shifted with a grinding sound. Beneath it, a narrow opening led downward. A hidden tunnel. Cold air rushed out, smelling like rust and time. I climbed down carefully, my flashlight beam cutting through the dust. The walls were lined with old metal shelves and plastic containers. At the very end of the tunnel was a heavy iron door. And on it, carved deep into the metal, were the words, "Property of Willow Creek Council." I pushed the door. It groaned open just enough for me to squeeze through. Inside was a small room, filled with file cabinets, maps, and microfilm reels. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Blueprints showing the entire neighborhood before it was built. Land transfers, false deeds, payment records. Millions of dollars funneled through shell companies tied to politicians, lawyers, even the HOA board. And there, at the center of it all, was a signature I'd seen before. Janet Whitlow, HOA president. But under her name was another. Someone higher up. A name that made my stomach twist. Lornex Holdings, Division of U.S. Homeland Infrastructure. This wasn't just corruption. It was a cover for something federal. Then I saw the last file, labeled deceased contractors. And inside, a list of names. Gary was there. So was my father. Next to each name, terminated cause exposure. I stumbled back. The flashlight flickered, and just then footsteps. Above me. Slow, deliberate. Dust fell from the ceiling as the sound grew louder. Voices. Flashlights cutting through the cracks in the slab above. I killed my light and pressed myself against the wall. Check the tunnel, someone said. Boots scraping against stone. They knew I was here. My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear it. Then one of the voices said something that chilled me. He's found the vault, terminate the link. The link. I didn't understand. Until my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen flashed once and went completely black. Dead. Then came a sound like metal shifting. The door behind me slammed shut. And I realized they weren't just coming to silence me. They were going to seal me in. I grabbed the flashlight again and aimed it at the walls, searching for another way out. There, a small drainage pipe in the corner, just wide enough. I dropped the files into my backpack and crawled toward it. Cold water running beneath my hands. Behind me, voices echoed again, closer. Seal it up, no witnesses. I forced myself through the pipe. It twisted and scraped. Then finally, light. I tumbled out near the creek, gasping, soaked. Behind me, the tunnel collapsed with a deep, final thud. I lay there in the mud, breathing hard, staring at the sky. The clouds had cleared. The moon was back. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't just a local cover-up. It was systemic. The HOA was just the front. The land deal, the condos, my father's death. All connected to something far bigger than Willow Creek. When I got home, I spread out the files, photos, and maps across my kitchen table. The evidence was undeniable. But if they could track me, follow me, and erase everything online, how could I possibly expose them without disappearing like Gary? And as I stared at my father's handwriting one last time, his words echoing in my head, "Don't fight them in the light," I started to realize what he really meant. To beat them, I'd have to become invisible too. The night I decided to disappear, the air felt different. Still, heavy, watching. Like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Streetlights hummed, faint and uneasy. And for the first time in weeks, there were no cars parked outside. No watchers, no black SUVs, just silence. That scared me more than their presence ever did. I burned every file I couldn't carry. Wiped my drives clean. Packed only what mattered. My father's note, the photos, the memory cards. If they were hunting for me, I'd give them nothing. But before leaving, I had one last stop to make. The HOA office. It was almost midnight when I got there. A small 2-story brick building on Oak Ridge Lane. The same place where Janet had smiled and handed me fine notices months ago. Funny how ordinary it looked. No guards, no alarms. Just a glass door with the words Willow Creek Homeowners Association fatting in gold letters. I broke the side window and climbed in. The air inside was cold and stale. Desks empty, lights off. Only the faint buzz of an old vending machine filled the quiet. I knew what I was looking for. A hidden server. The source of those transfers I'd seen back at the site. I moved through the hallway. Past the framed pictures of board members. Their faces smiling, proud. And right there, at the end of the hall, I saw him. Janet's husband, Harold Whitlow. Chairman. Smiling that same lifeless smile. And next to his photo, a small brass plaque. In memory of. He was dead. But I'd seen him 2 weeks ago alive, shouting orders at the construction crew. Unless he wasn't really dead. The thought sent chills down my spine. I pushed open the office door behind the plaque. And there it was, exactly what I'd expected. A hidden room. Metallic walls, filled with humming servers and small blinking lights. Rows of black machines stretching into the dark. Each labeled sector, LC property data. The blue glow pulsed gently. And in the center, a single terminal. Unlocked. Like someone was waiting for me. I sat down. The screen flickered to life. Lines of code scrolling fast. Financial transfers, false deeds, encrypted files. Then one window opened by itself. A chat prompt. Unknown, you shouldn't have come back. I froze. Fingers hovering over the keyboard. Me, who are you? Unknown, we built this place for control, not for freedom. Unknown, your father helped us, until he didn't. Unknown, you've made the same mistake. The screen glitched for a second. Then another message appeared. Unknown, it's too late now, look outside. I turned toward the window. A faint red glow in the distance. Flickering, spreading. Fire. The condos burning. Smoke rising into the night sky like a warning flare. Sirens started wailing far away. But what chilled me wasn't the fire. It was the figures I saw in front of it. Dozens of men, moving in formation. Not firefighters. Not police. They were in black, carrying cases. And behind them, Janet. Her face lit by the flames, calm, collected. Like she was watching something unfold exactly as planned. I backed away from the terminal. Grabbed the flash drive I'd brought and jammed it into the port. If I could copy even a fraction of this data, I could still expose them. But then the power flickered. The lights went out. And all I heard was the quiet click of a door closing behind me. Still chasing ghosts, Mark. Her voice soft, familiar. Janet stepped out of the shadow. No guards, no weapons. Just her, wearing that same smile from the day we met. You should have left when you had the chance, she said. Your father didn't listen either. I took a step closer. He tried to stop you, didn't he? She tilted her head slightly. Stop us? No, Mark, he built it. He was one of us. My breath caught. She kept talking. He believed people couldn't be trusted with freedom. He wanted order. The HOA wasn't about lawns and fences. It was about control. You inherited his land and his curse. I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, something inside me already knew. She smiled again. You're your father's son, Mark. You could still join us, or you can burn with what's left of this place. Then she turned and walked out. Just like that. Leaving me with the servers humming louder. The heat from the fire outside pressing against the glass. I pulled the flash drive free, pocketed it, and ran. The building shook as something exploded outside. The roof cracked, sparks flew. I jumped through the side window as flames swallowed the room behind me. The explosion threw me onto the grass. My ears ringing. The whole HOA office collapsing in fire and dust. When I woke up, the sun was rising. The once perfect suburb looked like a war zone. Half the new condos burned down. The rest sealed off by men in black uniforms. No media, no police tape. Just silence again. I hid in the trees. Watched as they loaded boxes, servers, equipment into black vans. Janet was gone. And when the last van left, so did any trace of what really happened. They erased everything. The land, the files, the story, even me. I didn't exist anymore. My house gone, my name off every record. It was like I'd been deleted. All I had left was the flash drive. And the truth. A truth no one was supposed to see. Now I live quiet off the grid. A few towns away. Sometimes I still see familiar faces in crowds, people who look like neighbors I used to have. But they don't look back. They just keep walking, like they've forgotten me. Or maybe they were never real to begin with. But I know one thing for sure. The HOA wasn't destroyed that night. It just moved, changed names, started again somewhere else. And every time I pass a freshly built neighborhood, with shiny mailboxes, matching lawns, and smiling faces, I can't help but wonder how many of them know who really owns their land, and how many are just waiting for the next name on their list to be mine again.